President of the session, Teresa Divya, teacher, Head of the Department of History, Srija, Teresa, Hanu, and all dear faculty members and dearest students, also secretaries of association. This is actually a talk which is designed to explicate Michel Foucault's theories regarding cinema. As all of you know, Michel Foucault, in his theories, has never directly postulated certain arguments regarding cinema. But one of the most interesting work of Michel Foucault, it is entitled as a story in itself. It's like this: I, Pierre Rivere, having slaughtered my brother, my mother, my sister, and my brother. It's about parricide. Parricide means a person who killed his father, mother, brothers and sisters. But this Pierre Rivere killed only his mother, sister and brother. This is a work of Michel Foucault, which is not widely discussed among historians, because it deals with an initial theoretical positioning of Michel Foucault, where he tried to showcase the most profound theoretical argument of Foucault or postmodernism, which is archaeology and discourses. This work was published in the year 1973. It was translated into English language by Frank Jelinek. Usually Michel Foucault's works are translated by Sheridan, but this work was translated by Frank Jelinek. It talks about the killing of a mother, younger sister, and a child, a brother, a kid who was about 7 years old. This is the real life incident happened in the life of a person who was living in the Normandy, Pierre Rivere. And why Pierre Rivere killed mother, sister and brother, or which is called as parricide. It was variously interpreted by people in power. The judges or the magistrates, the psychiatric counselors, the police, and other people who went into the details of this particular murder accounted for the murder in various ways, looking at Pierre Rivere as a madman, some calling him as a bestial and recalcitrant youth who wanted to disobey all regulations and rules. And some people, very microscopic minority of the people, scholars tried to look at him as a person with certain problems which couldn't be understood through the court judgments and pronunciations. So why Foucault articulates this idea, the connection between power and knowledge, is for the reason that how certain knowledge systems and perspectives are created by those people in power. I think you know about the connection between power and knowledge as is exposed by Michel Foucault. There is an inextricably interlinked connection between power and knowledge. Those who are powerful creates a kind of perspective which ultimately results in the production of knowledge or knowledge systems, which comprises of certain statements which get the labeling of truth. So those who are in the power are designated people to create truth, and they don't agree that they have created something false. So this infallibility of the people in power in creating truth statements is discussed at length in this work, I, Pierre Rivere, having slaughtered my mother, my brother, and my sister. And towards the end of these legal deliberations and all, Pierre Rivere made his own statement while he was imprisoned. He wrote about the incident from his perspective. When he wrote about the incident from his perspective, the entire of the story and the narrative so far established by the people in power became false or lies. What Pierre Rivere said in his statement or in a document, something like an autobiographical narrative of events leading to the killing of his mother, brother, and sister, he exposed some of the family problems, problems which were very strong in that family, like, quarrels and everyday quarrels between his father and mother, where even though his father was a very gentleman, the mother used to dominate and create so many problems to him, used to blame him and accuse him for so many things which happen in the daily life world. So Pierre Rivere was he was a sponge, a relief sponge between the father and the mother, and he suffered so much, and he became so depressed that he used to invent certain toys with which he could kill frogs and small animals. So even from his childhood, Pierre Rivere developed this kind of an attitude, a very hostile attitude towards all living things. First, he applied that in the case of small animals or reptiles, and then he applied that in the case of his mother, brother, and sister. And when Pierre Rivere wrote this autobiographical note, people began to understand the fallibility or the statements which used to be called as truth statements as wrong statements or lies or imaginations. And very interestingly, if you Google it, you can see that there is a film that was released in 1973 by the same name, I, Pierre Rivere, having slaughtered my mother, sister, and brother. It's a short film. I think it's just 1 hour, 20 minutes, something like that. I watched the film long ago. Yesterday I tried to watch the film, but due to range problem, I was not able to watch it. So anyway, you should definitely watch that. So when this incident, which was deliberated, studied and analyzed in order to establish notions of historical knowledge of Pierre Rivere, when that was filmed, it became an experiential kind of learning for historians and also people surrounding him. Up to that period, all versions about this particular incidents were, textualized. So when from the textual format it was translated visually, and when actors replaced his father, mother, brother, and sister and himself, the entire of the film assumed the characteristic of history in motion. So that became very experiential, that became touching for many people who viewed that. And some other people became so much attached to Pierre Rivere. For basically this film was, an adaptation of the autobiographical statement delivered by Pierre Rivere. So when Foucault's own work was cinematically imagined, Foucault himself finds that the cinematic adaptation of a book that was written by him is a very different kind of representation. So history is basically a representation or a re-representation. Why I am saying that history is a representation is for the reason that we consider some of the sources and evidences as primary, and we attribute a kind of sacredness to such documents. And most often such documents are textually formatted. And do you think that there is no fiction in such documents? And what is imagination? Imagination can happen in many aspects, in many respects, in many directions. So a person who is writing an official record in the colonial times is also under an imagination of the empire. Why are you not agreeing that? The positivist historians usually do not agree with that. Why the people who are considered to create evidences for the future at the time of writing a document, this guy may not be thinking that he is creating a document for the future, but basically every document, historical document, is created in their present. So a lot of imagination is there happening, which is phrased out as by, in the words of R.G. Collingwood in Idea of History, reenactment of history. You should definitely read Idea of History of R.G. Collingwood, because I usually consider Collingwood as a very orthodox historian, like the people of his times, but he used, in some of his pages, I forgot the page numbers, he talks about the representation as a reenactment. Just imagine about the incident that is happening today, this event. After 50 years, this event is frozen. Frozen in the sense that it will become a report compiled by our dear HOD Teresa Divya teacher. It becomes a principal's report where it says like this, that suppose someone came here to deliver a lecture at that point of time and he delivered a lecture, things like that. It will not definitely contain stories about the lecture, how the lecture got evolved. It won't refer to the death of my mother, definitely, because it was due to the death of my mother that this talk was earlier postponed. So it will not have any these officialized documents which are kept in the archives, in the words of Foucault, circulatory statements regarding the past won't have any reference to my personal struggles or personal agonies. So such a history is unilinear history. Such a history is factual history as per the basic understanding about history. Factual history. There is nothing more than that. So where do you endorse the emotions? Where do you endorse the personal angst, suffering, sorrow? The emotive heuristics in the documents is an important aspect we need to understand. So here, Foucault's theories, if applied well, turns out to be a very influential and very important methodology in understanding the nature of films, any kind of films. It can be films, which do contain certain histories which are historical in nature, or films which talk about the evolution of the film industry and all. So here, Foucault's archaeology, I just want to give you certain, definitional understanding about Foucault's archaeology. Foucault's archaeology is not the digging, excavation kind of archaeology. He strongly, personally, he disagrees with that. It is not excavation, it is not digging the past. Because Foucault was a person who was more concerned with the surface disturbances in history, events in history. So Foucault's archaeology, actually in some sense, it restores discourses. Discourses is another term developed by Foucault. I know discourses was a term that was, spoken about by Many theoreticians, historians, sociologists and all, but Foucault, according to Foucault, discourses comprises of certain utterances and statements which were, written or distributed under certain regulations or under certain regulatory frameworks. It creates a kind of meaning at a particular point of time, but after some time, it is not that meaning that is disseminated. The same text may, produce a different kind of meaning. There, every discourse means, all the statements. For example, some of the discourses related to the gender issues, all these discourses are created within a particular historical time. A particular historical time is most specifically a mental apparatus. It is not paradigm, because Foucault objects the term as paradigm, which was used with Thomas Kuhn. Foucault uses the term episteme. Episteme, E-P-I-S-T-E-M-E. Episteme is the mental framework or the apparatus within which people think at a given historical time. Episteme. So, discourses are created. Discourses are certain statements. Discourses are not debates. Certain statements which are created, articulated, created and distributed within a context. That context is episteme. Episteme means the mental apparatus within which you think and you act. In order to understand episteme, I can give you a good example. Go and watch 19th നൂറ്റാണ്ട്. See, a person living in, as we people, as spectators living in the 21st century, gets transformed into the mental apparatus of the 19th century. So for about 2 hours, 50 minutes, we are in the theater or the cinema hall experiencing this kind of, what you call, a mental apparatus which produced certain utterances, certain acts and certain performances at a given point of time, that is a historical time. This is called a episteme. So cinema enables you to go to that particular mental apparatus or mental umbrella within which you think. Is it possible for you people to assemble here at a different point of time in the 19th century is the question that you need to think. Is it possible for all of you to sit here in the 19th century? So 19th century was different. When 19th century is reenacted through actors, materials and the locational specificities, we get an opportunity, an experiential opportunity to feel the 19th century. It's a felt experience. And Foucault says that the frozen past is actually becoming enlivening. Or you can call it as a process of defrosting history. History is defrosted. Because history is frosted, stands still, It is there, out there, away from you. You cannot experience that. You cannot read that. You can comprehend that. You can articulate on that. And you can disseminate on the values of a past time, but you can never be there as a person. So Foucault's discourses, Foucault's archaeology, and basically archaeology, I need to explain archaeology also. I forgot to explain archaeology. Archaeology is a methodology of Foucault. The highest cognitive methodology of Foucault is archaeology. And what is archaeology? Archaeology, in Foucault's own words, is the history of conditions of possibilities of knowledge. The history of conditions of possibilities of knowledge. Knowledge in its varied forms. So when we use this archaeological method, we reach at a particular state where the particular knowledge system was created under certain circumstances. That circumstance, actually I told you, which is called the episteme. Don't get, confused between episteme and paradigm. Paradigm is a Thomas Kuhnian phrase. That's a different thing. Usually people get, confused about episteme and paradigm. But episteme is not like paradigm, because episteme is, it's a long-standing mental apparatus. It is there for a much long time. But paradigm changes, with a new invention and with a new revolution. Like for example, Newtonian science, developed by Newton, which ultimately entered in Newtonianism or Newtonian age, became a paradigm. It is not like that. So these are not individualistic oriented kind of departures from the kind of thinking, but this is basically a processual kind of changes in thinking which takes longer span. I hope you understand. So archaeology, according to Foucault, is the history of conditions of possibilities of knowledge. There is only possibility. Look at that, focus on that particular phrase, possibilities of the creation of knowledge. Foucault doesn't say that, Foucault do not want to say that, this is because of particular conditions, this knowledge is created. Thus, that knowledge is also liable to be questioned. Foucault never believed in any kind of objective knowledge. An objective knowledge which dismisses subjectivities, how can it be objective? We are writing an objective history of India which dismisses the diversities of India which are subjective, and you are saying that you have followed all the methodology, rigorous methodology, and you have come at this particular objective history of India which is very subjective. So all the positivist notions which were incurrent in those days, which were developed by so-called objective historians, perfect objective historians like Leopold von Ranke, or the successors and followers of Leopold von Ranke, the German historian who said that you can exactly replicate the past. And while I was a student for me, I used to doubt that whether historian is a Xerox machine to replicate the past. It's very easy to replicate the past. People replicate the past. You can't replicate the past because past is definitely frozen. It is static. It is there, out there. You have to invent, reinvent, and re-represent that past. So Foucault's use of these particular terms, discourses, because Foucault definitely developed a welter of terms, a network of terms. In that sense, Foucault was very different. Foucault never wanted to use the term which were used by positivists, because, while you use the term used by the positivists like objectivity or systematic creation of knowledge, or the so-called criticism, which we study, most often in degree classes, and internal and external type of criticism and all. What is internal and external, Foucault says that is not possible, because Foucault was basically an anti-foundational historian. He was against the foundations of knowledge. Philosophically, Foucault was above all the foundations of knowledge. All knowledge systems and perspectives created under certain foundations and bases are questioned by Foucault. That is why Foucault questioned the mega narratives and he wanted to have little narratives. Pierre Revere means, he was a youth living in Normandy. It was not the matter of attention for many of the historians living at that particular point of time. Nobody wanted to write a history about Pierre Revere, but Foucault got interested because, Foucault understood that certain discourses centered around these individuals signify certain structural kind of thinking in the society at that given point of time. And that kind of, thinking and writings and statements which were created, welter of statements which were created at that point of time, discourses, together they are called the archive of history. Because Foucault's archive is not, the archive is, permanently stationed at Ernakulam or Kotte. It is not a building. An archive is here. Because archive is a very slippery term for Foucault. So while you study Foucault, basically one important thing is that you need to understand the basic definitional criteria of different terms used by Foucault, because Foucault's terms, all these terms carry much weight. Like it is said that the weight of the words even can fire that particular text. വാക്കുകളുടെ അർത്ഥ ഗാംഭീര്യം ആ പുസ്തകത്തെ പോലും കത്തിച്ചു കളയുമെന്ന് പറയാറില്ലേ, ആ ഗ്രന്ഥത്തെ പോലും കത്തിച്ചു കളയാറുണ്ടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ. So Foucault's terms are like that, because Foucault really wanted to depart from established notions of historiography, because he was an anti-establishment, he was an anti-foundational kind of historian. So when you look at cinema, what is cinema? You should definitely read What is Cinema, written by Andre Bassi, in order to understand, what is cinema. Because without understanding the mode of representation of cinema, you cannot understand the historical representation that is displayed, visually displayed in several shots, in several angles, using different sounds and even now VFX and all, So cinema can be considered as a spectacle. Cinema is a spectacle. Now I am going to explicate before you certain key points regarding discourses. How discourses are created and how can you use archaeology in order to understand a particular film. Cinema is a spectacle. So here we need to expand the concepts of Foucault in detail. So for example, you look just at the film, historical film, claimed to be a historical film, and similarly claimed to be a historical text. Okay, right? That's why Romila Thapar did not stop her writing from 1965 onwards. She wrote the magnum opus History of India Volume 1, I think in the year 1965, 1 year before my birth. So I was not even born at that particular point of time. And Romila Thapar never believed that this is the final statement on history. She continued to write on this history because she was very well aware of the fact that it needs to be re-represented, reconfigured, and recasted in that sense. So cinema in that sense is a recasting. It's not casting, it's a recasting. A casting happens here. Manju is here, Teresa teacher is here. Some of the students are here. It's, you are all actors in this particular plot. This is a plot. But when this is recasted, Teresa teacher is not here, Manju is not here. It is replaced by actress, heroes and heroines. Right? And why cinema selects certain heroes and heroines is an important issue to understand archaeology. What kind of knowledge you want to produce and how that knowledge gets validated. That's also very important. So take for example the film Mamangam. That Mamangam means the Mammootty film Mamangam. I think which was released in 2019. 2019 or 2020? 2019 I think. Yes, 2019. Mamangam. It was a very controversial film, because, how Mammootty was, represented as a hero and at the same time as a person who showed certain feminine, gender qualities in that sense. A matter of fiction, sometimes considered. So here what you want to understand is that, cinema is not just the making of an individual filmmaker. Cinema is basically a filmmaker's creativity, no doubt about that. And who is the filmmaker? Filmmaker is usually considered to be the director. Filmmaker. And there are several makers for a cinema. Right? There are several makers. Who are those makers? The producer is there. Can you hear me? The director is there. The cinematographer is there. The technicians are there. Sound engineers are there. The colorist is there. The costume designer is there, right? Then you have the light boys. You look at the hierarchical organization of a cinema industry, right? From the producers to the light boys and the mess people who distribute tea and coffee, right? So cinema industry itself is something like a factory which jointly connects together through their work in creating a particular kind of cinema. A representation of a social issue, a political issue, or a cultural issue, or a biopic, whatever be like that. So, for example, the historical film, as we call by genre. So, Mamangam in that sense also proves or showcases the power of the industry. There is an industry just behind Mamangam. You just cannot look at Mamangam as an individual effort of a historian or a historian, no doubt about that, You cannot say that I can write a book on Mamangam, but there is no industry behind me. I have a tradition of historians who have written on Mamangam earlier. I have complete freedom to write and interpret Mamangam in my own way using historical evidences, right? But here, the thing is that at the core, any cinema, any historical cinema is produced by an industry in that sense. You have to look at the factories of production. A cinematic imagination cannot be triggered by individual talents and ambitions. Those cinematic imaginations will be remodulated and reconfigured through the intervention of the industry. You know about that. So what happens here is that In Mamangam, or you take, for example, take the case of a film, it's better to take the case of Kerala Varma Padashiraja, where Padashiraja's image is, actually the image which is diametrically opposite to the image that is displayed in the cinema. Because if you go by the historical documents, Padashiraja was definitely not a beautiful person, not a smart guy. Padashiraja was, a lean fellow wearing a red cap and with a beard and, a short guy using only one Pattamundu and never wearing ornaments and used to move around on the elephants and looking like a monkey. This is the image characterization of Padashiraja as per colonial company official reports. Because if you trap Padashiraja, if you kill Padashiraja, these people should be able to understand this person is Padashiraja. You got a point. Otherwise, the British cannot be able to understand who is this person killed, it's Padashiraja or not. They are not knowing about that. So, being like that, but cinema, when it came into cinema, you can see that an altogether different person is, playing the role of the protagonist, Padashiraja, with a heroic body, lot of ornaments, looking like a Che Guevara, and always riding and galloping on the horses, beautiful, So what is happening there is the power of the industry, and the power of the industry is so powerful that the image of Padashiraja is compressed into the celestial stardom of Mammootty. So the celestial stardom of Mammootty is a discourse among us, It's a powerful discourse among us. So the industry cannot neglect that. So any kind of historical recasting and re-representation in cinema is not individualistic, but it is also influenced, greatly influenced by the demands of the industry or the pressure of the industry. So now you look at the historical figure who is coming and waging war against the company, like the hero, playing the role against the villain, Cinema always wanted to project the villain-hero trajectory. Who is the villain here? East India Company is the villain. If you recollect Padashiraja's cinema, you'll be able to understand that in the very first shot, it is about, a Tamburan who defied the orders of the company, the hero is projected there because he is the hero. So it is to be stated like that. That is not like writing a William Logan's Malabar Manual or Kekan Kuru's Padashi Samararekal. It is not like that. So he is to be projected like that. So the celestial stardom is to assert that, yes, he is the hero. Padashiraja is the hero because Mammootty is acting as Padashiraja. Not any other actor who rightly represent the physical characteristic features of Padashiraja as per the company records. You got the point. So, why cinema is doing this? Is it a sin? Is it a fault? Is there an error in doing like this? Is a question that is always thought about and argued by film historians belonging to the postmodern tradition. Because Michel Foucault was basically a postmodern historian, also a post-structuralist historian, and he always slips from postmodernity to post-structuralism and like that. Sometimes he shows the characteristics of none of these postmodernists and post-structuralists. That's why Foucault always, Foucault was very fluidic in that sense, because Foucault was once interrogated by a journalist, and the journalist asked Foucault that in 1960 you spoke like this, and in 1970 just repeated that, and in 1980 you spoke like this. Anyway, totally different from what you talked about in 1960. And Foucault said, and this person asked, why Foucault you are always saying like that? Foucault replied that, if I am here to say what I said in 1960, what is the relevance of my statement in 1980? So Foucault is very fluidic and he moves from one opinion to other opinion. It is not incorrect, but he was actually trying or applying the theory of, I think, maybe Karl Popper, falsification. He was weeding out, taking out the false on various occasions, because he never considered that his own statements are very objective and very valid statements. It can be challenged by anybody. So why here, what is happening here is that now you just look at the definition of archaeology of Foucault. These are conditions of possibility of knowledge production, archaeology, right? So look at the creation of Padashiraja, or look at the creation of the hero protagonist in Mamangam. These are the creations or conditions which made the possibility of a knowledge that is cinematic knowledge. That's why I wanted to explain what is the terminological meaning of archaeology. So discourses are discourses happening not just about Padashiraja or the hero in Mamangam, but discourses are discourses larger happening around the creation of the cinema, that the discourses, major discourses happening around the star factor, the industry factor, the box office hit, things like that. All these are discourses. So that is to be taken into account of while you understand a historical film. Now, I told you that cinema definitely is having the power to take back the spectator into the frozen past. I told you. And who is a spectator? Like the thing that happened in the film Pattamadaam, I told you. You are taken back. And cinema also offers you certain conditions within certain hours in sitting inside a cinema hall in order to ruminate over the past in a very different manner. So cinema in that sense, uses certain utterances, certain sound, certain music, certain BGM, certain VFX, etc., in order to transpose it to you from one condition to the other condition. I told you that cinema is a spectacle in that sense, right? So cinema, in taking back the spectator is the person who wants to see the film. A spectator is also conditioned by the same industry, advertisements, all the teasers and trailers which are circulated, articles and public opinion about cinema, the reviews about cinema and all. So a spectator is also created within a particular conditioning of the society at a particular given point of time. Because, the spectators of 1970 changes. The mindset of the spectator of 1970 is not the mindset of the spectator in 2021. It's an entirely different spectator who is sitting in front of the screen. So Foucault, if you use Foucault's theory in order to understand the particular shift in the capacity of the spectator to think about cinema, then again, the crucial issue of imagination comes up there. There is an imagination there with the script writer, there is an imagination there with the director, with the photographer, with the technicians, with the sound expert, and there is also an imagination happening with the spectator. So sometimes the spectator becomes hysteric, neurotic spectator, psychologically moving spectator. So this neurotization of spectator is also happening inside the cinema hall. It's very interesting analysis, which was already used by, studied by people like Freud, Jacques Lacan and all, because basically they were only interrogating about these films from the viewpoint of psychology and all. But Foucault actually integrated that with history. Lacan and Freud used to study the cinema, spectatorial imagination and experience based on psychology, theories of psychology. But Foucault used a different method of psychohistory or historical psychology in order to understand what kind of an image is constructed on the screen and how that meaning of the image is transmitted into the spectator's mindset. So a whole plot of, a new kind of a revolutionary thinking is happening inside the theater. So theaters or cinema halls become spaces of a new thinking which generate possibilities of the creation of a new kind of knowledge. Now just imagine about, the shift from the theater culture to the OTT culture. You will understand that. You go for a cinema inside a theater or a cinema hall with some friends, take a coffee, talk with people, you are sitting in the crowd, you are one among the crowd. So naturally, the crowd is there. The crowd is not just a crowd who went to buy this and that in the market, but this is a crowd which is a purposive crowd, who have gathered there in order to watch the film, in order to enjoy the film and experience the film. And when the spectator is becoming a part and parcel of that particular crowd, the spectator's own behavior gets, transformed. You got the point? That is why we feel like, crying. We feel like laughing. We look at others. They are also laughing in that sense, just to assert that, you are not the lone person laughing there or weeping there. And even if you weep silently, right? Without other people seeing you, because you think that this is actually a change of behavior which may be a matter of fun for other people. But this is actually a spectatorial transformation. The mindset of the spectator inside the cinema hall is undergoing a transformation and under different conditions. And does it change from one film to other film? Does it have any changes or mutations happening in the spectatorial experience from one period to other period? Definitely. No. You look at the technicalities concerned, Now you feel like intensively associating with the plot because of the cinematic techniques. So whatever happens in the industry remolds. In the same way history is recasted, reimagined, the spectators are also recasted and reimagined. The character and nature of the spectators also changes. I have an experience in that sense. I watched the film Virus. It was in 2019. And in 2020, March 23rd, you have the lockdown. And then on several times, 3 or 4 times I watched Virus in order to understand how this film is taken. It talks about the story of the virus that is a coronavirus. Actually, it's not coronavirus, it's Nipah virus. Okay, right? Because, in the pre-March 2020 period, I was a spectator who was not directly influenced by this particular disease, particular virus. No virus is there. And Nipah virus was very foreign to me. I considered, the spectators in the theater considered that, this is a Perambra affair. No, it's not going to come to this place. Okay, right? So we watched this which certain inquisitive nature, what is happening, how the virus is moving. Is the virus a villain? Because of when the virus villain is, introduced in the cinema, it comes with a different sound. It's not like KPM or Barangin are coming on the screen, Virus comes with a separate sound like that thing, And then after watching Virus cinema in the post lockdown period, I felt that, I am also experiencing the same kind of, the virus effect, I felt more in Perambra than in my hometown. So that particular experiential level of understanding of a film changes with your own experiences in the life world. So several such factors causes changes in the mindset of the spectator. So spectator is also recasted and reconfigured. The mindset of the spectator is also recasted and reconfigured. That is also based on the power of the film industry. It is not just the story or history of the filmmaker, the power of the film industry. So that is archaeology. If you want to understand how this spectatorial imagination changes, it cannot be explained solely based on certain individualistic statements and interventions, acting of Mammootty or acting of Parvati Thiruvoth and nothing like that. But it's also based on the interventions, the changes that is happening in the film industry. The power of the film industry comprises of the stars, advertisement about the stars, then advertisements about the cinema, the reviews, the propaganda, then the VFX, all the technologies associated, and it is also associated with the theatres within which this is screened. If Mamangam is screened in 1970 in Kerala, in 1970 Kerala spectator will definitely get thrilled by that. But a 2022 spectator going into a theater of 1970 and seeing this Mamangam in 1970, the spectatorial imagination is different. I hope you got the point. That is, the material conditioning of or the aesthetical reconfigurations happening through changes in technology and all will definitely influence the kind of understanding, the kind of feeling one receives in the theater, in the cinema hall. This is the point I want to explicate.